Chapter 0, Thrown Away. The first time the world ended, I was already dead, and the woman I'd have died for was the reason. It started on Awakening Day. The dawn was like any other until it wasn't, and then the system descended on the whole world at once and handed out ranked abilities to ordinary people overnight. F to S, the weak to the gods. Gates tore open in the streets and spilled monsters, and the strong became hunters who cleared them, and everyone else learned, fast, exactly where they ranked. I ranked low, I woke weak and stayed weak, and I let myself be used because I was in love. My girlfriend, Sierra, took an S-rank power and climbed, and somewhere along the way she decided I was dead weight. My rival, Tristan, smiled the whole time he helped her decide it. The end came the way it was always going to. Varga, a man who'd done the math on the human race and found it wanting, broke a high gate over the city on purpose and drowned the streets in monsters. Sierra and Tristan left me behind to buy themselves time, and they didn't look back, and I died in the dark watching the people I trusted run. And then I woke up, gasping, alive, the morning before Awakening Day, with 3 years of memory of exactly how all of it goes wrong. Every gate in order, every lie, every smile that meant a knife. I remembered all of it. This time when the system came, it did not make me weak. It folded a whole world into my hands and called it space, an infinite store, a step through nothing, a blade of folded air, a prison that crushes. And I already knew where every gate would open, which traitor would smile, and exactly when the city was going to die. They threw me away once, when I had nothing and knew nothing. This time I came back knowing exactly where every knife was and carrying an arsenal folded into a pocket of the world. This time they were going to pay. Chapter 1, The Last Day. The last day of my first life, the sky over the city cracked open like a dropped plate, and everything that poured out of it wanted us dead. It was 3 years into the apocalypse, and I was still what I had always been, a low rank awakened with a weak ability and a stubborn streak, scraping through a city that had stopped having room for men like me. When Varga's high gate ruptured over downtown and the monster tide came down, I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went toward the people I loved instead of away. The streets were chaos. Sirens, fire, the ground shaking, a gate gaping overhead and spilling things with too many limbs. I had no arsenal, no god-tier power, just a length of rebar I'd torn loose and an ability barely strong enough to make me faster than a dying man should be. The first creature that lunged at me, I put down with the rebar through its eye, and it cost me more than it should have. A woman was huddled against a collapsed storefront, frozen. I grabbed her arm and hauled her up and shoved her down a side street, away from the worst of it. Go, I told her, and didn't wait to see if she made it. I had somewhere to be. Sierra was out there with Tristan, and she was waiting for me to come for her, even if, as it turned out, she wasn't. I bled my way across 6 blocks I should never have survived, weak and outmatched, and refusing to stop, because that was the one thing I'd always been good at, not stopping. By the time I reached the corner where Sierra and Tristan had made their stand, I was running on nothing but the thought of her. She was blazing with her S-rank power, beautiful and terrible, monsters dying around her in droves. Tristan stood at her shoulder, smug even then. I called her name and stumbled toward her, ready to get her out, and she looked at me, and I saw finally what I was to her. Don't make it harder than it is, Ronan, she said, not even unkind. You were never going to survive this world, at least this way you're useful. For a second I didn't understand. Then I did. The monsters were closing from 3 sides, and they needed something to slow the tide while they ran, and the low-ranker who'd come to save her was exactly that. Tristan's smirk widened. He'd been waiting a long time to watch this. Useful for what? I got out. A distraction, Sierra said, like it was obvious, like it was kind. And then she and Tristan turned and went over the barricade and into the dark, and they did not look back, and the horde came in where they'd been standing. I fought anyway, not because I could win, I couldn't, I never could, but because not stopping was the only thing that was ever mine. I found an old building with its windows blown out and put my back to a wall and swung the rebar until my arms gave, and the monsters came and came and came. My weak ability gutted out. My strength wasn't enough. It had never been enough. A wave of claws bore me down. Teeth found me. The weight of them crushed the air out of my chest, and in that last red moment, clarity hit like a thrown switch. Every sign I'd ignored, every time I'd made myself smaller to fit beside Sierra, the years I'd handed to people who were always going to leave me in the dark the second I stopped being convenient. My last thought wasn't fear. It was a wish, simple and savage. Let me do this again. Let me know next time. Let me make them pay. The world went black. And then I woke up gasping, my hands flying to a wound that wasn't there. The sheets under me were cool and dry. No blood, no teeth. I was in a bed, my old bed, in the cramped apartment I'd lost years ago, in a room I hadn't seen since before the world changed. My heart slammed against ribs that should have been crushed. The phone on the nightstand glowed. I reached for it with a shaking hand and felt the old familiar crack across its screen, and the date on it stopped my breath cold. The phone said it was 3 years ago, the morning before the world changed. I had every memory of how it ended, and it was about to begin again, with me knowing exactly where it all went. I sat there a long time, holding a cracked phone in a dead man's bedroom, and waited for it to feel like a dream. It didn't. It was real. I had died in the dark, while the woman I loved climbed over me to save herself, and I had been given the whole thing back, every gate and every lie and every smile that meant a knife, with 3 years of knowing exactly how it goes. A cold calm settled into me, the kind I'd never had the first time, because the first time I'd had nothing and known nothing. Awakening day was tomorrow. The day the system came, the day it all began. I didn't cry and I didn't waste the morning being grateful. I made a list. Sierra, Tristan, the gates in order, and the man who broke the sky. This time I would be ready for all of them. Chapter 2, Awakening. I spent my last ordinary morning doing the thing I never got to do the first time. I prepared. I woke before dawn in a body that still ached with the memory of dying, and I lay there a moment counting hours in my head. The system would descend a little before noon. I knew it the way I knew my own name now, not from any clock, but from 3 years of living past it. I dressed in plain, practical clothes and packed an ordinary backpack. Cash, a good knife, a crowbar, water, the cheap first aid kit from under the sink. No arsenal yet. I had nothing but my own 2 hands and a head full of the future, and that would have to be enough for a few more hours. I walked to a small park near the edge of town, the kind of place no one would look twice at a man sitting alone, and I sat under an old oak and went through it all one more time. The first gate would open by the old city hall. I knew who would clear it, and who would die trying, and which worthless drop from it would be worth a fortune by winter. I knew where Sierra would be and Tristan, and I knew the date, 11 months out, when Varga would break the sky. I sat with all of it, cold and calm, while parents pushed strollers and joggers stretched, and the whole oblivious city enjoyed its last normal morning. When the hour came, I stood up, and the sky went dark like a curtain drawn over the sun. The streets fell silent. People froze, staring up as an iridescent portal tore open high above City Hall, shimmering like liquid silver, and the first twisted shapes began to spill out of it. And then, without warning, a window opened in my vision, a panel of light laid over the world, text scrolling down it. My own stats resolved, strength, agility, health, mana, and an A rank glowing faint and green beside my name. A respectable ability, exactly the one I'd planned for, a rank strength, solid, believable, the perfect face to show the world. Everyone around me saw their window. Only I saw the second one, the one that came after, the one with no rank letter it could hold. A second panel opened, just for me, and where the first had a clean green letter, this one had only a word, stark against the white, space. The system has awakened. Ability acquired, strength A rank. Hidden ability acquired, space S rank. I kept my face as blank as everyone else's was terrified, and I slipped out of the panicking crowd into the mouth of an empty alley, and there, alone, I tested what I'd been given. I reached out not with my hand, with something behind it, and a fold opened in the air, a pocket of dark that wasn't anywhere. Storage. I slid the cracked screen protector from my pocket into it and watched it simply cease to be present, held weightless and timeless in a space that existed only at my command. An arsenal could live in there, a fortune in loot, anything, everything, carried without weight. Then the other one. I fixed on the far end of the alley, folded the distance between here and there, and stepped, and the world lurched and I was 30 feet away, my stomach catching up a half-second late. Void step. Silent. Instant. I did it again and again, grinning in the dark like a man who already knew he'd won every fight he hadn't had yet. Skill unlocked. Storage. Skill unlocked. Void step. When I stepped back out of the alley, the world had begun to end on schedule. Gates were shimmering open across the city, monsters pouring through, people screaming and scattering exactly as my memory said they would. And there, 4 blocks down, near the park I remembered, a low gate, weak monsters, rich loot, the one that made other people in my first life and is going to make me in this one. It opened precisely where and when it should, and the strange vertigo of being a prophet in my own life rose up in me, and I pushed it back down with cold purpose. Everyone else was running away from it. I checked the knife at my hip and the future in my head, and I started walking toward it, unhurried, the only steady thing in a city coming apart at the seams. Chapter 3, First Gate. I walked into the first gate of my second life, already knowing what killed the people who walked into it in my first. The morning was different from any other, because I knew exactly what was coming. The first gate shimmered open near the park, just where my memory said it would, an early, low-level dungeon where unprepared rookies died and the lucky ones got rich. Today it would do neither of those things. Today it would just make me. I stepped through the threshold and the world shifted. Cold, damp air, a narrow corridor lit a faint, sick green, the layout of the place etched into my mind from a life I'd already spent. 3 floors, monsters worse on each, a boss chamber thick with rare drops. My foreknowledge didn't make me reckless. It made me prepared, every step deliberate, the knife from my pack in one hand and an arsenal a thought away in storage. The first wave came, goblins, crude blades, flickering malice in their eyes. I folded myself into concealment and let them pass, their footsteps echoing on stone, and then I came out of the empty air behind them with a spatial blade in my hand, an edge of folded space, and took the first one's head before it knew I was there. The second turned. I void stepped behind it and put the blade through its back. The third backed away, wary of a man who kept appearing where he hadn't been, and I stepped through a pocket of space and ended it mid-snarl. I went down through the floors the same way, clean, fast, unhurried, every pattern remembered, every weakness known. When my borrowed blade chipped, I dropped it into storage and drew a fresh one from the small armory I'd stocked, because this time I came stocked. The boss waited in the last chamber, a towering ogre with a club the size of a man, the thing that had crushed a dozen hunters in my first life. I remembered its one weakness, a soft spot behind the left shoulder. When it raised the club, I slipped past its guard into concealment, came out directly behind it, and drove a rapier into that exact spot. It shuddered, roared, and came down in a heap of muscle and bone. Gate cleared, level up. I let myself a single breath of satisfaction, and then I went to work on the part that actually mattered. I swept the chamber with the practiced efficiency of a man shopping a list. A core here that would be worth a small fortune by winter, a material there that no one else would recognize the value of for months. The junk drop that becomes priceless once people understand what it does. I scooped it all up and slid it into storage, weightless and timeless, while the future I carried in my head told me precisely what each piece was worth and when to sell it. A pang went through me, brief and cold, looking at a fortune in my hands. This was what they threw away. Sierra had decided I was dead weight, worth less than a stat point, and left me to die in the dark, and here I was, an hour into the new world, richer and stronger than she'd ever let herself imagine I could be. The grief flickered, and I let it. Then I let it go and walked out of the gate. Outside, the city was still coming apart, gates shimmering, monsters in the streets, hunters scrambling to organize. I moved through it with purpose, already planning the next move, when a scream cut across the chaos and pulled me around. In an alley off the main street, a shadowy figure was pinned, scrambling back from a monster that had spilled out of a smaller gate. I was already moving. I drew a katana from storage, void stepped above the creature, and brought a spatial blade down through its hide, shearing off an arm. It spun, roaring. I folded into concealment, waited a heartbeat for it to overextend toward the person on the ground, and came out behind it to put the blade through its neck. It dropped in a gout of blood. The figure on the pavement looked up at me, and it was Lena. Brave even now, already getting her feet back under her, her eyes wide with a relief that had something else underneath it. "You came back for me," Lena said, like it was the strangest, best thing in the world. "The first time around I never had. This time I always would." I held out a hand, and she took it without hesitation, her grip firm. There was a whole history pressing down on that moment that she couldn't feel and I couldn't forget. How I'd let her drift out of my first life while I chased a woman who was always going to leave me. How much I'd lost by not seeing who actually mattered until it was far too late. "You're safe," I said. "I know," she said, and there was steel under the fear. There always had been. Lena had never been someone who let being afraid decide what she did. I'd just never been paying attention. I made a silent vow, standing there in the blood and the noise. This time I'd keep the people who were real. This time I'd keep my promises. The first life had been one long regret. This one was the chance to pay every one of them back, and I was going to start by never again leaving Lena in the dark. Chapter 4: The Ones Who Left. The first time I saw Sierra again, she was laughing at something Tristan said, alive and golden and entirely unaware that she had already killed me once. It was at the registration hall, days into the new world, where the cities awakened were gathering to sign on with the forming hunter associations. The place buzzed, newcomers at one counter, the early risers at another, everyone recalibrating to a world of ranks and gates. And there, near the front, was Sierra, tall in sleek black, blazing quietly with the S-rank power that had already started drawing a crowd. Tristan stood at her shoulder, relaxed and arrogant, a knot of new admirers hanging on him. I stood in that hall and looked at the two people who had left me to die in the dark, here, breathing, climbing, with no idea what they'd become, and the grief and the cold fury moved through me in equal measure, and under them both, something steadier, the strange power of being the only person in the room who knew how this ended. I kept my face still. I was not the man they remembered being able to use. I crossed to them. Sierra's expression flickered toward recognition before it hardened into the practiced dismissal I knew so well. Tristan grinned. "Look who it is," he said, loud enough for his audience. "The nobody who thought he'd amount to something." The old Ronan would have flinched, or worse, tried to win them back. I just held Tristan's eyes, calm and cool, and let him see that the man in front of him didn't fit the loser in his memory. "You don't know me yet," I told Tristan, and I let him hear that I meant it. "Give it time, you'll wish you'd been nicer." For a moment the hall went quiet around us, the tension crackling. Tristan's eyes narrowed, but he had no answer for a man who wouldn't play his part. I turned, met Sierra's gaze for exactly one beat, long enough to see the flicker of something she couldn't name, doubt or curiosity, or the first faint crack in her certainty, and walked away. I could feel her eyes follow me the whole way out. The chance to make the point came faster than even I expected. A low gate opened near the hall that same hour, and Tristan, never one to miss an audience, stepped up to clear it, boasting to Sierra, daring the crowd to watch him shine. The monsters poured out, twisted and fast, and Tristan swung his blade in wide showy arcs and found, quickly, that showing off and surviving are different skills. They pressed him back. His face went white. The crowd's cheer faltered. I walked out of the crowd and into it. I used nothing but the public face, A-rank strength, and the muscle memory of a man who had fought these exact things before, and I went through the monsters Tristan couldn't, clean and unhurried, while the hunters around me went silent and then started to murmur. I put the last one down a step from where Tristan stood frozen, and I didn't crow about it, didn't say a word. I just looked at him, and then at Sierra, whose eyes had gone wide with something that was no longer dismissal, and I walked off while they were still staring. Walking away landed harder than anything I could have said. That night alone, I added it up, and I made sure it was the right list. It would have been easy to make this only about Sierra and Tristan, about taking back everything they'd taken from me. I was going to do that. But the first life had taught me what it cost to be a man with nothing but a grudge and no one at his back, and I wasn't going to repeat it. This time the revenge was real, and so was everything around it. Lena, who'd believed in me when I was no one and whom I'd lost by chasing the wrong woman. Marcus, and the crew I'd never had. And out past all of it, the catastrophe only I remembered, Varga, and the day he'd break the sky. I wrote it plainly, in handwriting steadier than my first life's ever was. Pay them back, in the open, as myself. Get strong enough to stop what's coming. And keep, this time actually keep, the people who were real. The old Ronan would have crumbled under the weight of knowing all of it. I didn't. I had a god-tier ability folded into the space behind my hand and 3 years of the future in my head, and for the first time in either life, I wasn't afraid of what came next. I was looking forward to it. Chapter 5, Rising Star. I spent the first weeks of the apocalypse doing what no one else could, showing up to the right gate at exactly the right time, every single time. It was the simplest cheat in the world and the most unfair. While other hunters scrambled to find gates, fought over them, died learning which ones were survivable, I walked to the exact spot a gate would open and was already through it before the crowd arrived. I cleared a flame-touched gate in a warehouse district solo the morning it opened. I reached a rare drop dungeon a full hour before the pack and walked out with an echelon blade nobody else even knew to look for. I pulled a panicking rookie team back from a horde they'd never have survived, cut the monsters down with what looked like nothing but good A-rank strength, and let them tell everyone. That was the point. Every clear built the legend I wanted, a prodigy A-ranker with an uncanny nose for gates, nothing stranger than that. The space ability did the real work and stayed invisible, a void step here, a spatial blade there, always where no one was looking. To the city, I was just a rookie who kept doing the impossible, and the whispers spread on their own. Within weeks, my name was on the ranking boards at numbers that didn't fit my rank, and the new world's shape was setting around me, hunter associations forming, guilds recruiting, an economy springing up around cores and gates and rare drops. I moved through it with a precision that should have been impossible, because to me, it wasn't precision. It was memory. At a hunter's bar where rumors and strategies traded hands, I drew the kind of attention I'd never gotten in my first life. A gruff veteran watched me from across the room, Marcus, all scar tissue and suspicion, the type who valued skill over rank and had clearly decided I was a puzzle worth solving. Saw him clear the gateway of flames solo, Marcus told the hunter next to him, not bothering to lower his voice. First week, nobody does that. I let him watch. In my first life, Marcus had been the kind of man who'd have made a good ally if I'd ever been worth his time. This time, I intended to be. And then the attention came from higher up. She found me the day after a solo clear that had a crowd going silent, a woman who carried herself like the most capable person in any room she walked into, because she usually was. Ray, one of the city's top-ranked hunters, sharp-eyed and unhurried, looking me over like a problem she fully intended to solve. "You keep walking out of gates that should have eaten you," Ray said, looking me over like a problem she intended to solve. "Either you're the luckiest man alive, or you're lying about something. I'm very good at finding out which." I met her gaze without flinching. "Is there a test you'd like me to take?" Her mouth quirked. "Maybe, first, let me see what you've got." I obliged, a short, clean sequence of strikes, drawing a blade from storage, all skill and no flash, nothing that gave away the space underneath. She watched the way a predator watches another predator, not impressed, exactly, but recalculating. Whatever she'd expected, the lucky rookie wasn't it. "You're not just some lucky rookie, then," she said. "No," I said, "and neither are you." Something moved behind her eyes, interest with an edge to it, the kind I had no practice receiving, because in my first life, a woman like Ray would never have looked twice at a man as small as I'd let myself be. "I'll be watching," she said, turning to go. "And if you're half as good as they're starting to say, maybe we'll meet again under better circumstances." She left Marcus staring after her, and me filing away the fact that one of the strongest hunters in the city had just decided I was worth her time. The ones who'd thrown me away felt it too. Sierra's name still came up everywhere, the S-rank star riding high, but lately it came up next to mine, and the comparison was no longer flattering to her. Word reached me second-hand. She couldn't square the rumors of the rising A-ranker with the dead weight she'd discarded, and it unsettled her in a way she couldn't name. Tristan, eclipsed and anxious, heard my name with envy now instead of contempt. I passed a cafe once where Sierra used to make me wait while she decided whether I was worth her evening, and felt the old bitterness flare and then cool. There'd be time for them. Every gate that opened was building me toward the day I'd settle it, in the open, on my terms this time. But it was building toward something else too, and only I could hear it. Under the noise of the rising city, the clock was ticking down to the day Varga would break the sky, and the balance I was tipping in my favor would have to be enough to stop it. The collision was coming. All of them, Sierra, Tristan, and the man who'd ended my first world. This time, I'd be the one who saw it first. Chapter 6, Void Step. Power that grows 100 times faster than everyone else's stops being a secret quietly, so I learned to spend it where only the dead could tell. In private, I drilled the space ability until it stopped being foreign. Void Step had started as a stumble, now it was an instant. I chained the steps together, fold, reappear, fold again, crossing a room without touching the floor, blinking through the gap behind a wall, the world lurching and catching up a half-beat late each time. And on the edge of my awareness, something new waited to unlock. A silver line in my mind's eye that wasn't a blade so much as a cut in space itself. The discipline was in the hiding. The city saw a strong, predictable A-rank strength hunter, and I needed it to keep seeing exactly that, so the void steps happened where no one watched, and in the open, I moved like a man who simply hit hard. Marcus made it harder. He'd attached himself to me for a high-rated gate run, and his eyes narrowed when I came around a corner I hadn't walked to. "Where'd you go?" he asked. "Stretching my legs," I said, easy, and he let it drop, but he filed it away. Marcus was the type who valued skill over rank and trusted nothing he couldn't explain, and I was a column of things he couldn't. "Ray's meeting us at the gate," he said, and we moved out into a dungeon rated well above what a rookie had any business attempting, which was exactly the point. Inside, the air was thick with decay, the walls pulsing with a sick energy, and a horde came at us out of the dark. I drew a blade from storage. Marcus set his feet and held, good but outnumbered, the sheer count of the things grinding us back. Then one lunged for Marcus's exposed back, and I didn't have time for a sword. I reached for the silver line on the edge of my mind and pulled, and Spatial Blade answered, a cut of folded space that opened along its arc, and the monster came apart in two clean halves that didn't bleed for a full heartbeat, because the wound wasn't a wound. It was a tear in the world. The thing folded into the gap and was gone. Skill unlocked, Spatial Blade. Marcus staggered back, mouth open. "What? How did you do that?" I let him see it, not all of it, but enough. I cut the next monster out of the air the same way, and the next, the horde thinning into pieces that dissolved into nothing, and Marcus stopped fighting for a second just to watch a man he'd pegged as muscle rewrite what was possible. We pushed to the heart of the gate, where the boss waited, a thing of razor claws and too many eyes, the kind that had killed teams in my first life. I void-stepped behind it, opened its throat with the spatial cut, and when it spun, I pulled an arsenal from storage and finished it under a weight of steel it never understood. It came down in halves and silence. Gate cleared, level up. Marcus stood in the quiet after, looking at me like he'd never seen me before. "What are you, really?" he asked. I'd heard that question from Tristan's mouth as a sneer and from Sierra's as a dismissal. From Marcus, it was just honest. So I gave him something honest back, not the whole truth, not yet, but the start of it. "Someone who knows exactly what's coming," I said, "and who'd rather not face it alone. I've got power you don't have. You've got 20 years of sense I don't. I'm building something, Marcus. I want you in it." He chewed on that, this gruff old survivor who'd outlived better-ranked men by trusting his gut, and his gut had clearly decided I was worth the risk. "We'll talk," he said, which from Marcus was a yes. We walked out of the gate into a city where my legend was growing one impossible clear at a time, and for the first time it didn't feel like climbing alone. In my first life, I'd had no one at my back when it mattered, and it had killed me. This time, I was building the crew I never had, starting with the one man stubborn enough to follow a mystery into a gate and come out asking to do it again. Ray was waiting when we emerged, sharp-eyed, taking in the state of us. "Impressive," she said, and there was a question under it she didn't ask out loud. "You're rising fast, Ronan." I held her look and said nothing useful, and she smiled like that was an answer too. The top of the city was watching me now. Good. They'd all need to be before this was over. Chapter 7. Lena. Lena had believed in me when I was nobody, in a life she didn't even know we'd already lived, and this time I wasn't going to waste it. We took the rare quiet between gates on the steps outside her building, the sun going down red over a city that hadn't learned yet how bad it was going to get. She'd awakened a fire ability, a good one, a steady flame she could throw in a controlled arc, and she talked about it the way she talked about everything, with that drive of hers that never needed an audience. "What about yours?" she asked. "Why strength, you think?" I picked my words, because I've always been the one who just kept standing back up, I guess. Which was true as far as it went. The rest of it, the space, the second life, the 3 years in my head, I kept folded away, even from her for now. She studied me with that look she had, the one that saw more than I said. "There's another side to you now," she said. "There always was, I think. People just didn't look." In my first life, I'd spent years chasing a woman who only looked at me when I was useful. Lena gave without keeping score, and sitting there, I felt the difference like coming in out of the cold. She reached over and brushed her hand along my arm, and the warmth of it went straight through me, and neither of us said the thing that was sitting right there between us. "We should sleep," I said, eventually, because if I didn't break it, I wasn't going to. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, quick and certain, and went inside, and I stood in the dark a while longer than I needed to. The fan service of the universe, I thought, was that it had given me back the one person worth keeping, and a second chance not to be an idiot about it. We fought together 2 days later, when a gate ruptured in the warehouse district, and the things inside spilled out faster than the local hunters could handle. I didn't carry her into it. She walked in beside me, geared and ready. "Cover me," I said, and she did better than cover. When the monsters came in a wave, she planted her feet and threw a sheet of flame across the floor that turned the front rank to ash and bought me the half-second I needed. I void-stepped behind the big one and opened its throat with a spatial blade, and she was already turning to burn the two coming up on my flank before I had to ask. We moved like we'd done it for years. I stayed a step ahead because I knew the room, the patterns, the weight of every monster before it moved. She filled every gap I left, fire and nerve, never once needing to be saved. When the last of them came apart into nothing, she was breathing hard and grinning, and she looked at me like I was worth standing next to, which, the first time around, no one ever had. "You're something else," she said. So was she. That was the whole point. I'd spent a first life believing the strongest thing a man could want was a powerful woman's approval. It turned out the thing actually worth wanting was someone who'd put her back to yours in a burning room and trust you to hold the other side. We walked out into a cooling alley, the rain not quite falling, and she laced her fingers through mine. "I don't want to lose you," she said quietly, not knowing she already had, in another life, or that I'd died with her name on a list of people I should have chosen and didn't. "You won't," I said, and meant it with a cold edge I didn't let her hear, because I knew what was coming. I knew the date Varga would break the sky, knew who didn't survive it the first time. The warmth of her hand in mine wasn't just warmth anymore, it was the stake. It was the thing that turned getting strong from a revenge into a reason. She kissed me once more, soft, and walked off toward her place, her silhouette shrinking against the streetlights, and I watched until she was gone. Then I turned for home, and the warmth in my chest hardened the way it needed to. I had someone to lose now. That made me more dangerous than any amount of power could, because this time, when the sky broke, the people I loved were not going to be left standing under it. Chapter 8. The Rankings. The first ranking tournament was supposed to sort the awakened into winners and the people who'd serve them, and everyone already knew which one I was supposed to be. The city's hunters packed the makeshift arena, betting slips changing hands, the new associations watching to decide who was worth recruiting. Sierra's name moved through the crowd like a prayer, the S-rank star, the favorite, with Tristan strutting at her side, basking in her glow. Marcus and Lena stood in my corner. Ray watched from the high seats, unhurried, taking everything in. And the crowd had already decided the talked-about rookie was a long shot who'd be lucky to last a round. The early rounds were combat trials, each fighter sent against a summoned monster, scored on speed and control. I cleared mine fast and clean, and I did it on the public face, a rank strength, the muscle memory of a man who'd fought all of this before, the space ability kept folded away where no one could see it. No tricks the crowd could point at. Just a weak, rookie ending things that should have given him trouble, like they were nothing. I varied it on purpose. One I finished in a single brutal exchange. One I drew out a beat to let a nervous lower-ranked hunter beside me look good by comparison, no reason to grind a kid into the dirt for a crowd. One I took apart with pure anticipation, already where the monster was going before it went. Round by round the noise changed. Doubt, then disbelief, then my name, chanted by people who'd have spat it an hour earlier. By the time the bracket narrowed, the crowd wanted the one matchup everyone had been whispering about. Ronan versus Tristan. He swaggered to the center, flexing for an audience that was already slipping away from him. "You're nothing but the weakling who couldn't protect Sierra," he spat. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I'd watched Tristan fight in another life. I knew his footwork, his tells, the way he overcommitted when he was angry, and he was already angry. He lunged first, a heavy fist I sidestepped so his own weight carried him past me. He spun, threw a kick, and I caught the leg and put him on the ground in front of everyone he'd ever performed for. "Is that all you've got?" he snarled, scrambling up. I let him come again, and again I simply wasn't where he expected, and a clean strength-backed blow took the wind and the arrogance out of him at once. No space, no tricks. Just a man he'd written off being, in every way that the crowd could see, completely out of his league. He went down the last time and stayed down, chest heaving, staring up at me with something that had stopped being contempt a while ago. I beat Tristan in front of everyone he'd ever performed for, and I didn't say a word while I did it. The silence afterwards said it better than I could have. I turned and walked away from him, and the arena erupted. Level 10 reached. The crowd parted for me on the way out. Marcus reached me first, gripping my shoulder hard, fierce pride on his scarred face. "You did it," he said. Lena slid in at my other side and found my hand, green eyes warm. "You were incredible." And then Ray came down from the high seats, the way a top predator crosses a room, unhurried, certain, and put out her hand. I took it. "You've been making an impression," she said. "Strong and clever, the clever's the rare part." She didn't gush, she assessed, the way she did everything. "A guild like mine could give you protection, resources, a seat at the top table. That means more in this world than people realize." "And loyalty?" I asked. "Earned," she said, without missing a beat, and I liked her a little more for it. "I'll think about it," I told her. Her mouth quirked, not offended, intrigued, and she stepped back. "Until next time, then." The guild offers started before she'd even finished walking off. But none of them held my attention, because across the floor I'd found the only face in the arena that mattered to settle. Sierra was watching me, and for the first time since the day she'd called me dead weight, her eyes held no dismissal at all, only doubt, and the first cold edge of something that might, given time, become regret. She was finally seeing me, not the ex she'd discarded, someone who'd become impossible to ignore. It was a start. It wasn't enough, not yet, and not the thing that mattered most, because past Sierra and Tristan and all of it, Varga's shadow was still growing, and the clock in my head was still counting down. This was one step in a much longer game. But it was a good step. I let myself have it, Lena's hand in mine, and walked out of the arena, a name the whole city now knew. Chapter 9, Regret. Sierra built her whole shining reputation on one famous clear, and in my first life, I was too dazzled to notice it was never really hers. The gate at the old downtown library had made her name. In the first timeline, she'd taken the credit for clearing it, and the story had carried her halfway to S-rank fame before anyone thought to check it. This time I got there first. I went up to the third floor where a knot of hunters stood stalled and afraid, and I cleared it clean, fast, on the public face, nothing the crowd could point at but a strength, rookie doing what the great seerer had only claimed to do. When I came back out, the story rewrote itself in real time. The hunters who'd watched her take that bow were looking at me now, and the math was simple and merciless. She'd claimed this and failed to deliver it, and the rookie just did it in front of them. I didn't say a word against her. I didn't have to. The truth did the work, and her pedestal started, quietly, to wobble. She came to me 3 days later. I opened my door, and Sierra was standing there, the woman who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years of memory, who'd left me to die in the dark, and her face was doing something I'd never seen it do. There were lines around her eyes now, a crack in the confidence. "We need to talk," she said. I stepped aside without inviting her in. "What do you want?" She wanted me, that was the whole of it, dressed up however she could dress it. She wanted me on her side in her guild, useful to her again now that useful was something I'd become. She was charming first, the old warmth she could turn on like a tap. When that didn't move me, she went vulnerable, then almost pleading, offering in careful pieces the things she'd always withheld. "Things were different back then," she said. "I've changed, can't we start over?" And the strange thing was, watching her, I could see she half believed it. There was real fear under the performance. She wasn't a cartoon. She was just a person who had only ever known how to want things for what they could do for her, and who was, for the first time, afraid of being the one left behind. So I held the mirror up. No rage, no gloating, just the truth, level and quiet. "You didn't lose me because I got strong, Sierra," I said. "You lost me the moment you decided love was something you only spent on people who were useful. I just took a while to believe you. And then I left, and that was the cruelest thing I could have done, because it was kind." She flinched like I'd hit her. "That's not fair," she whispered, but there was no conviction in it, because she knew it was exactly fair. I watched the realization land, what she'd thrown away when she threw me away, the man I'd become that she'd never let herself imagine I could be, the simple fact that I didn't need her and never would again. "I have people who stayed," I said. "That's the difference. It always was." Her hand dropped. The charm was gone, the desperation gone, and what was left underneath was just regret, clean and total and far too late. "I see that," she said quietly. "I really do." I closed the door on her, and I felt no triumph. I felt something better. I felt free. The revenge I'd carried out of the dark wasn't paid by hurting her. It was paid by no longer needing her at all, by closing the door and feeling nothing on the other side of it but room. I went to Lena. She opened her door with a sleepy smile and pulled me in before I'd finished knocking, and the warmth of it was the whole argument, the entire case for the life I was building instead of the one I'd lost. I didn't tell her everything yet, not the rebirth, not the full shape of what I carried. That conversation was coming, but not tonight. Tonight I just sat with her, the contrast made flesh, the woman who'd stayed against the one who only came back when I was worth something. "It's over with her," I said, "for good." "Good," Lena said, and didn't pretend not to know who I meant, and didn't make me explain. But over her shoulder, out the window, the city's gates still flickered against the dark, and the clock in my head kept counting. Sierra was settled. Tristan was broken. The personal debts were paid. The larger one wasn't. Varga and the day he'd break the sky was still out there, closer every hour. And now, with Lena's hand warm in mine, I finally had everything to lose. That was fine. A man with everything to lose fights harder than a man with nothing. I'd learned that the hard way in another life. This time I'd use it. Chapter 10, Foreknowledge. I decided to tell the two people I trusted the one thing I'd told no one, that I had already watched the world end once. I sat them down in their apartment, Marcus with his arms crossed, Lena with both hands around a mug, and I told them the truth, not the version where I was a lucky prodigy with a knack for gates, the real one. "I've lived these 3 years before," I said, "all of it. I died at the end of them, Varga broke a high gate, the city drowned, and the people I trusted left me to buy themselves time. And then I woke up the morning before awakening day with every memory of it intact, and the system gave me something it gave no one else. I let them see the shape of the thing behind my hand, a fold of space opening in the air between us, a blade of nothing gone again, a god-tier space ability. And 3 years of knowing exactly how all of this goes. They didn't believe me, of course they didn't, so I proved it the only way that mattered. I told Marcus the rank and the drop of a gate that hadn't opened yet, down to the hour. I named an event 2 days out that no one could have known. I called 3 small things before they happened and watched belief settle over the room like cold water because the alternative that I was guessing got more impossible with every hit. Marcus processed it like the veteran he was, not how, but what do we do? Lena understood something else first, the part about how I'd died and who'd left me in the dark. She reached across and put her hand over mine and didn't say anything, which was the right thing to say. "Why tell us now?" Marcus asked. "Because it's not over," I said. "The worst of it is still coming, and I'm not facing it alone this time. That's the part that got me killed." Then I told them the rest, the thing the whole second life was actually about. "His name is Varga," I said. "In a little under a year, he's going to break the sky on purpose, and everyone we know is going to be standing under it. I'm the only one who knows, so we're the only ones who can stop him." I laid it out, a powerful awakened who in the first life ruptured one of the highest gates deliberately and flooded the city, killing thousands, not in madness, but on purpose, for power or a system reward or some cold conviction that the world deserved culling. No one believed it was deliberate until it was far too late. This time, someone believed it 11 months early. Marcus's hands had curled into fists. "Thousands," he said. "More if we don't stop him. The city won't stand." Lena's voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "Then what's the plan? How do you even start to take down someone like that?" "We get strong faster than he expects," I said. "I know which gates make people. We hit every one of them before anyone else. I know which powers and items matter. We collect them. And we win the allies I didn't have last time, starting with Ray. We have months. We use every day of them." "I'm in," Marcus said. "Whatever it takes." "Me too," Lena said. And that, more than any gate or any power, was the thing that had already changed. In the first life, I'd faced the end with no one at my back, a low-ranker nobody would stand beside. This time, before I'd thrown a single punch at Varga, I had a veteran's loyalty and the steady fire of a woman who'd chosen me, the exact thing whose absence had killed me. "We'll hit the list one gate at a time," Marcus said, already planning. "Build the crew, make sure nobody gets caught off guard like last time." "I'll reach out to people," Lena added, quietly, "the ones worth having." I stood, and the 2 of them stood with me, and the future that had crushed me alone felt, for the first time, like something 3 people might actually be able to bend. "Let's go to work," I said, and we walked out into the city together, determined to write a different ending this time. Chapter 11, Varga. I knew exactly when Varga would break the sky, so it shook me to find him already moving months before he was supposed to. It started as a wrongness in the pattern, a gate surge in the northern districts that my memory said shouldn't happen for another season, hunters going missing near the sites, small things, out of order, and out of order was the one thing my whole advantage couldn't survive. I'd spent the second life certain I'd always be the man who knew what came next. Finding the future moving without me sent a cold drop straight through that certainty. Marcus found the thread first. "Hunters vanishing near the northern gates," he said, spreading it out for me, and Marcus, since the day he'd asked what I really was and decided to follow the answer, had been exactly the kind of ally the first life never gave me, steady, sharp, all in. 3 this week, always near a surge. That's not monsters, that's somebody collecting. "Earlier than it should be," I said, and felt the butterfly effect chill of it. My own changes had rippled forward, or Varga was simply smarter than the memory had shown me. Either way, the map in my head had started to lie. We went north and found one of the surges, a gate ringed not by panicking civilians, but by men who moved with cold, trained efficiency, funneling something out of it. Not hunters, a crew. I slipped one with a void step and a tap on the shoulder just to confirm it, then folded back into concealment before he finished turning. Varga's men, I told Marcus. This was never natural. The man himself surfaced 2 days later in the open, where I'd never expected him this early. A public address at City Hall, a crowd gathered, the rising hunter associations listening. He was tall and unhurried, and he didn't rant. That was the first thing that frightened me. He spoke in a calm, reasonable voice about the system and its purpose, about the gates as a test of worthiness, about how the weak would be culled so the strong could carry humanity forward. Some in the crowd recoiled, more of them nodded. Varga didn't sound like a man who wanted to end the world. He sounded like a man who'd done the math and found the world wanting. That was so much worse. When the speech ended, his eyes found me in the crowd and held. He crossed to me unhurried, and up close the gap between us was a physical pressure, the difference between a man and a mountain. "And you are," he asked, mild. "Someone who sees it differently," I said, keeping my cards face down, keeping my voice level over a heart that was hammering. "You're ahead of schedule, and more dangerous than I expected." Something flickered behind his eyes, not alarm, just the faint interest of a man noticing a tool he hadn't catalogued. "We'll see how far behind you really are," he said, and turned and walked away, and I let him, because there was nothing else I could do. He didn't know I was a threat. He didn't need to. The gulf in power was its own answer. I stood there shaken, genuinely, usefully shaken, and did the math myself. He was months ahead. He was a realm above me and climbing. My foreknowledge was decaying into a rough sketch. By every measure, I should have despaired. Instead, I let the fear harden into a plan. I had months, not none. I had a god-tier ability that grew faster than anyone's, and a list of the exact gates that would make me strong, and a crew the first life never gave me. The gap was enormous, so I'd close it the only way I knew how, faster than Varga thought possible, one gate and one ally at a time. Ray was the next piece. She was still circling me, half ally, half rival, too sharp to commit and too curious to walk away, and I knew I'd need her before the end, the way I'd needed her and never had her last time. I'd bring her in. I'd bring all of them in. Because the clock in my head was running faster than it ever had, and under the noise of the rising city, I could feel the day coming, the day Varga would break the sky. This time someone was racing it. I turned back toward Marcus, already planning the first gate. It wasn't a vendetta anymore, it was a countdown. Chapter 12, Confinement. The gate I needed next was one I'd never have dared in my first life, which was exactly why I'd brought someone who scared me almost as much as it did. I stepped through the portal into a high-rank dungeon, the air crackling, the walls slick and pulsing with a sick green light. Marcus came in at my shoulder, jaw set, and Ray strode ahead of both of us, fluid and certain, one of the strongest hunters in the city, twin blades already drawn, the air around her humming with the force power that had made her name. She glanced back once, gave a sharp nod, and we went to work. The first wave came at us twisted and fast. I drew a spatial blade and Ray launched into them, her swords flashing, each strike throwing a monster back with a concussive crack of raw force. I void stepped behind the aggressive ones and opened their throats, folded into concealment, came out somewhere else. We fought like we'd drilled it for years, which, in fairness, we had over the weeks since I'd started pulling her into my orbit. "Watch your six," I called, spotting a hulking thing closing on her blind side. She was already turning, spun, drove a kick into its chest that put it through a wall, and met my eyes for half a beat in the chaos. "Thanks," she said, calm as still water. Then the floor's guardian came, a massive, armored monstrosity that shrugged off her force blasts and my blade alike, its sheer mass making every hit it landed feel like a car wreck. Ray threw everything she had, and it drove her back, and for the first time I saw her expression tighten toward something like doubt. We weren't going to outtrade this thing. I had to reach for something I didn't have yet. I felt it on the edge of the space tree the way I'd felt spatial blade once, a deeper fold, a finisher, waiting for enough pressure to force it open. So I forced it. I wrapped concealment around Ray and me as the monster loomed, and inside that pocket I reached past everything I knew how to do. I folded space around the creature, sealed it inside a shrinking pocket of crushing nothing, and I shattered it. The fold collapsed inward to an impossible point, and took the monster with it, the dungeon ringing with the sound of space slamming shut. When the pressure released, the thing was simply gone, unmade. Skill unlocked, confinement. Skill evolved, confinement and shatter. Ray stared at the empty space where a monster the size of a truck had been. Ronan, she breathed, ore and something sharper in it. That's incredible. I owe you one, I managed, ragged. And vice versa, she almost smiled. We used it the rest of the way down, confinement and shatter, folding whole knots of the swarm into nothing whenever the numbers got desperate, Ray and Marcus carving the rest. By the time we cleared the gate's heart, the three of us were spent and standing, which was its own kind of victory. It was outside, in the quiet after, that the bill came due. The moment I stepped clear of the gate, my body felt like it was unraveling. Not ordinary fatigue, something deeper, a lingering ache in my chest like something had been torn loose. The future had a price, and so did spending the space ability at that scale, and they'd come for payment at the same time. Mana depleted, warning, strain beyond safe limits. Ray caught me before I went down, swearing, already pulling a first aid kit out. You need to rest, she said. In a minute, there was always one more thing. She found wounds on me I hadn't registered, fine cuts that hadn't been there before the fold, that didn't bleed quite right. This isn't normal, she said quietly, cleaning them, her fingers gentle and sure. The touch was charged with something neither of us was saying out loud, and under that was a harder thing. She knew I was carrying something enormous, and she decided to patch me up first and demand the truth later. I know it's not normal, I said. What is it then? Her eyes locked on mine. I almost told her I didn't, not yet, but the real cost of the day wasn't the cuts. It was that my foreknowledge had gone soft at the edges, the map blurring, the future I'd counted on shifting under my feet a little more each time I changed it. Power wasn't free, the rebirth wasn't free, and the closer Varga got, the more I'd be flying without the one advantage that was supposed to make all of this survivable. Something's changed, I admitted. Let's get back to headquarters. I'll explain what I can. She got me up, took my weight without being asked, and we started back through a city that had stopped being the one I remembered, stronger than I'd been an hour ago, and marked for it, with the one person sharp enough to know I was hiding the most important thing about me, holding me steady the whole way. Varga's lead was closing. It just wasn't closing for free. Chapter 13, Acceleration. 3 weeks before the sky was supposed to break, it started breaking early, and only I knew it for what it was. The rhythm of the apocalypse had settled into something grim and routine, gates opening, hunters clearing them, lives lost in the gaps. But in those last weeks, it began to go wrong in ways my memory hadn't promised. The sky darkened earlier each day. Gate surges came harder and out of sequence. Hunters vanished off the boards, others turned strange and compromised, and the authorities called the warnings panic and did nothing, exactly as they had the first time and exactly as they would until it was far too late. I had Marcus running a team north to the volatile gates near the old power plant, Lena south to hold an evacuation choke point, both of them moving on instructions drawn from a future that was getting blurrier by the day. I was stockpiling storage packed with blades and armor and supplies against the days I knew were coming, and chasing the last piece, which was Ray, when the word reached me about Tristan. His arrogance was gone, people said. In its place, something cold and desperate, and I knew that shape from my first life, a man eclipsed, humiliated, terrified of being a nobody, who would take any shortcut to feel important again. I went to find him before the shortcut finished him and took the city with it. I found him in a dim alley, his eyes shadowed and wild. What do you want? He sneered, fear under the bravado. I saw your name on the board, I said. I wanted to see what you'd done to yourself. Getting ahead, he spat, while you play it safe. Then, because he never could help himself, Varga's giving me power, real power, and Sierra's the one who put me in the room with him. My gut tightened, Sierra. He laughed ugly. She thinks she can steer him, she can't. But he offered me a forbidden boost, dangerous, sure, enough to take back my place. He flexed his fingers, and I could see the wrongness already starting to crawl under his skin, the borrowed thing changing him. "You're walking into Varga's hand," I said. "He'll spend you and not blink." "And what'll you do about it?" He stepped close, voice dropping. "You beat me once as a nobody. I'm not losing again." I tried for a moment to reach the scared kid under it. "This isn't about you anymore, Tristan. What Varga's planning." "I know what he's planning," he snarled, "and I've got leverage now." "Leverage won't save you when the sky comes down." He shrugged my hand off his shoulder. "Get lost. This time I win." And he turned and went to take the power that was going to eat him, and there was nothing left in him to talk to. He came for me a few nights later, the way I'd known he would. The borrowed power crackled around him now, manic and unstable, hollowing him out even as it made him fast. "Finally," he said, "I knew you'd come." "You were always predictable," I said. He flared bright and wrong, and I let him see exactly how little it mattered. "You sold the whole city to feel important for a month," I told Tristan. "You were always going to. That's the difference between us. I came back to stop it, and you came back to be the one holding the knife." He lunged. I void stepped behind him, and when he spun, his borrowed power flared and threw his balance off. It was eating his control faster than it gave him strength. I opened a spatial blade where he was about to be, and he barely fell clear of it, into the wall. He came again, overextended, all rage and no sense, and I closed the distance with a step through space and put him down against the brick. The borrowed power gutted out of him in a burst of dirty light, and Tristan crumpled, gasping, finished, undone less by me than by the shortcut he'd reached for. The same disease I'd watched Sierra's whole world be built on, refined to a point, and turned on the man dumb enough to swallow it. "I knew you'd be the one," he whispered. "At least I went down trying." He hadn't gone down trying, he'd gone down taking, but I didn't say it. I just stepped back and let the silence be the verdict. Sierra was there, in the shadows at the alley's mouth, watching the man she'd chosen over me fall apart. Her eyes found mine for a moment, and what was in them now was regret all the way down. She said nothing. There was nothing left to say. One more thing I'd carried out of the first life, closed. After that, there was only the eve. The city braced without knowing what for. My crew didn't have that luxury, they knew. Marcus had secured us a warehouse-turned-bunker. Lena was running weapons and evacuation routes, and Ray had joined us in full now, drawn the last of the way in by what she'd seen me become. The team I'd never had the first time, assembled at last, against a clock only I could hear. I knew how this ended. The first time, Varga's high gate had shattered and the city had drowned, and I'd died in it. This time it would be worse, because everything had diverged. Every change I'd made had brought consequences I couldn't fully read anymore. My foreknowledge had stopped being a map. It was just a warning now. And there was Sierra, the unspoken question. In the first life, she hadn't survived the break, dead or ruined, depending on which story you believed. This time I'd have a choice about that. I didn't know yet what I'd do with it. Night came down heavy. Marcus checked his watch and looked at me. "We're ready." "We've got this," Lena said, hand steady on her sword. Ray stood a little apart, quiet, decided. The warehouse doors rolled shut, sealing us in with our supplies and our resolve, and the countdown in my head ran down towards 0. Days now, maybe less. The city waited, oblivious. We waited, and we knew. Whatever came through that broken sky this time, it was not going to find me on my knees, alone, the way it had before. Chapter 14, The Break. I had watched the sky over the city break once already, from underneath, dying. This time I watched it from a rooftop I'd chosen a week in advance, with a plan. Marcus and Lena were beside me, Ray a step behind. The city spread out below us, oblivious in its last quiet minutes. Commuters on the ring road, lights coming on in tower blocks, a whole million people who had no idea they were already counting down. I knew the second it would happen. I'd known for a year. It didn't make watching it any easier. And then it came, right on the schedule, burned into my memory. Far over the city center, the air began to glow wrong, a deep arterial red bleeding across the dusk, and I felt the pressure of it from a mile away, like a held breath about to break. Varga reached out with everything he'd spent 11 months gathering, and the high gate shattered. The sky tore open like a wound the size of a district. The sound reached us a half-second after the light, a low tearing roar that set off every car alarm and every scream in the city at once, and out of the rip came the flood, monsters in their thousands, raining down onto the streets, onto the ring road, onto the lit windows of people who'd been making dinner a heartbeat ago. The first time I'd lived this, the death toll by morning had been in the tens of thousands. I had the number memorized. I had every name I could save memorized too. The first time I'd been down there in it, helpless, low-ranked, swept under a tide I couldn't touch, watching the people I trusted run. This time I was above it, prepared, with an arsenal in storage and a crew at my back and a god-tier ability folded behind my hand. The contrast was the whole point. The day that had ended me was about to become the day I turned. "Spread out," I said. "Hold the choke points. Get people moving toward Lena's routes." Marcus and Lena broke in opposite directions, already commanding, and Ray and I went down into the streets. I pulled a blade from storage and stepped into the flood. Void stepped behind a charging beast, spatial blade through its throat, gone before it dropped. A knot of ghouls came out of an alley, and I folded them into a pocket of space and shattered it, reducing them to scattered nothing with confinement and shatter. I moved through the chaos with the uncanny certainty of a man who'd walked this map before, and every monster I put down was a person who lived this time who hadn't the first. Ray fought beside me like a storm, one of the strongest hunters in the city, her forcepower tearing paths through the horde, clearing room for civilians to run. Marcus anchored the center with brutal, steady aggression. Lena held the evacuation line, fire and authority, turning a rout into an orderly retreat. The people who would have died alone in my first life were being pulled out of it one decision at a time. I handed weapons from storage to anyone who'd take them, and ordinary people found their nerve in the face of my preparedness, took up swords and shields, and turned to fight beside us instead of running. A giant ogre surfaced and lunged for Marcus's line. Void stepped behind it and opened its hide before it reached him. We held our pocket of the city, but I could see the larger break spreading like fire through the rest of it, gate after gate tearing open, more than any number of hunters could hold, and I knew holding the line was never going to be enough. The break wouldn't stop while Varga kept it open. I had to reach the source. "Marcus," I called, "you've got command here." He didn't argue. "Go, I've got Lena and Ray's flank." It was the thing I'd never been able to do in my first life, trust people to hold while I went for the throat. I trusted them now. "Keep them safe," I said, and Ray met my eyes. "Go," she said, "we've got this," and that was its own kind of goodbye. And then, through a gap in the monsters, I saw Sierra. She was pinned, surrounded, the S-rank star about to die in the disaster, exactly as she had the first time, the woman who'd left me to die in this very catastrophe, now about to be left herself. For half a second, the symmetry of it sat there, almost tempting. "I won't become what you are," I said under my breath, and I went. I cut the monsters off her with spatial blades, clean and fast, and hauled her clear. Her eyes went wide when she saw it was me. There was no time for words, and I had none to give her. I didn't save her because I'd forgiven her. I saved her because the day I started leaving people in the dark to die was the day I became Varga or Sierra or every person who'd ever decided someone else was expendable, and I would burn the whole city down before I let it make me into that. I left her safe behind a wall of fighters and turned away without looking back. Then I turned toward the torn heart of the sky, where Varga was holding the wound open, and I started running. The break was his, and I was the only one who'd come back knowing how to close it. Chapter 15, Onslaught. The road to Varga ran straight through the part of the city where I'd died the first time, and it was worse now than it had been in my nightmares. I pushed through the collapsing district, boots crunching glass and twisted metal, the air thick with smoke and blood. Monsters poured from every torn gate in the sky. Ray cut beside me, a storm of silver and force, taking a beast's head off mid-stride. "Ronan," she called over the roar, "keep moving, we're almost there." We'd found a rhythm in the chaos, my spatial blade clearing the space ahead, her power throwing back the things that tried to close the gap, the two of us carving toward the epicenter through a tide that should have drowned us both. I void stepped behind a charging ogre, drove a blade through its spine, dragged it into a fold, and out the other side as dust. But the space ability was straining. Every void step, every confinement, pulled harder than the last. The cost the gate had taught me back when I unlocked the finisher flared hotter with each use, the torn loose ache in my chest deepening towards something I couldn't keep ignoring. I was burning through myself to reach him, and I knew it, and I didn't slow down. The smoke ahead told me the evacuation point was in trouble. I found Lena's line nearly overrun, a horde closing on the clearing where she was funneling civilians out, her fire holding a wall that was buckling, and Marcus in front of it, making a stand, alone in the worst of it, so the people behind him could run. I cut my way to them. Lena, hold this edge, I've got Marcus. She was exhausted, fear and resolve at war in her face, but she planted herself and threw up a curtain of flame and didn't break. I reached Marcus as a brute the size of a car bore down on him. I folded it into nothing with confinement and shatter, but not before its claw raked him from shoulder to hip. He went to one knee, bleeding badly, and kept his blade up anyway. Marcus! Still standing, he gritted, though he plainly shouldn't have been. He'd bought the evacuation its minutes with his own blood, the way the best of them always did. Don't waste it. You're the only one who can close that thing. He jerked his chin at the torn sky. Go end it. I'll hold here till they're clear. It was the hardest thing the Second Life had asked of me yet, to leave a wounded man holding a line and trust him to hold it. In my first life, I'd had no one to trust, and it had killed me. So I trusted him. I gripped his good shoulder once, hard, and I went. For all of them, I said. For all of them, he echoed, and turned back to the horde. The epicenter was a wound in the world. The high gate hadn't just opened. It had been torn wide and held open, power pouring through it in a ragged torrent, monsters spilling endlessly from the rupture. And at the heart of it stood Varga, and he had grown. Whatever he was channeling out of the break had remade him, the cold composure now wrapped around something vast and humming and wrong. He was far stronger than the man I'd faced at City Hall. I expected it would be you who made it this far, he said, unsurprised, almost bored. The stubborn ones always do. You sound very calm, I said, for a man who's about to lose. He smiled, and it was worse than a snarl. Ronan, always so certain you're the righteous one. His gaze sharpened, taking the measure of me, the strain, the spent mana, the wounds I was carrying. But certainty isn't strength, and this time you don't have enough of either. He was right, and I knew it, and I stepped forward anyway, because Marcus was bleeding behind me and Lena was holding a line, and a whole city was running under a broken sky, and there was no version of this where I turned around. The gap between us stretched impossibly wide. The power coming off him made the air hard to stand in. Every instinct I had said I wasn't ready. Whatever it takes, I murmured, and set myself, and we faced each other across the torn heart of the city. The man who'd ended my first world, and the man who'd come back to stop him, on the brink of the only fight that had ever really mattered. Chapter 16, The Trap. I had spent a whole second life, sure I'd be the one who knew what was coming. Varga smiled at me across the broken sky like he'd been waiting for exactly this. Well, he said, surveying the wreckage of the epicenter with sinister satisfaction, the great Ronan finally arrived, just as planned. The words dropped into me like ice. Just as planned. He'd known I would come, known a man who could see the future would walk straight into the heart of it, and he'd built the whole thing to catch exactly that man. I summoned a spatial blade and tried to void step to his flank, and the space around me refused to fold. Your little tricks won't work here, Varga said, lifting a hand to show a glowing orb pulsing above his palm. An anti-space field, the whole epicenter. You can't fold what I've nailed down. His smile widened. I built it for you specifically, the man who steps through space, pennied like everyone else. My foreknowledge was useless against an enemy who diverged this far. My god-tier ability was caged. For the first time since the woodshed of my first life, I was just a man, outmatched, in front of something vastly stronger, and he wasn't finished. And your friends, he said, almost gentle. He gestured, and I saw Ray not bound. She'd never go down that easily, but pinned, caught in the crushing edge of the same field that caged me, fighting it and losing. And my comm crackled, Lena's voice ragged through it. The evacuation point was collapsing, the horde breaking through, civilians and her line about to be overrun. Ray here, Lena there. Both because of me, both about to die, and my power, the power I'd spent years of my life and the ache in my chest to build failing to protect either of them. It was the exact shape of my first death, come back around, the people I loved in the dark, and me unable to reach them. This is the part you already know, isn't it? Varga said, watching my face. You felt this before. He spread his hands, reasonable, monstrous. So, save your friends or stop me, you cannot do both. I'm even giving you the choice, which is more than the world gave you the first time. He pressed in, and the field tightened, and Ray's defiance flickered as it crushed down on her, and Lena's voice broke up in static, and I had nothing in the arsenal that could be in two places at once or punch through a core realm field. This was the low point. He had built it perfectly. Every door was shut. Surrender it, Varga said softly, and his fist began to close, and I understood he meant all of it, the space, the memories, me. Give me what you carry, and I'll let the woman go. You have until I finish closing my hand. And something in me went very still and very cold. Because he'd made one mistake, the same one Sierra made, the same one the whole world had always made about me. They all thought I'd fold to save myself, or bargain, or break. They'd never once understood the only thing I'd ever actually been good at. Once I'd died because I had nothing and no one. Now I had everything to lose and a power that bent the world, and I decided, with Varga's hand closing on all of it, that I would tear space itself in half before I watched anyone leave me in the dark again. The anti-space field screamed against me as I pushed back into it. Varga's hand kept closing, and deep under the cage, under the ache, under the spent and shaking limits of an S-rank ability that was never supposed to go any higher, something began, all at once, to break open. Chapter 17, Beyond. S-rank was supposed to be the ceiling. I put my shoulder against it, the way you'd put it against a door with everything you love on the other side, and it gave. Varga's anti-space field crushed in on me at the torn heart of the city, his hand closing, Ray pinned, and fighting it somewhere in the press, Lena's line breaking apart over the comm. You think you can match an S-rank? He sneered. I stopped trying to match it. I closed my eyes and reached past every limit the system had ever set on me, past the ceiling, into the infinite expanse that had always been waiting on the other side of it, and space answered with something it had never been before. The field that caged me wavered, then meant nothing, because you cannot nail down a thing that has stopped obeying the rules you nailed it with. Ability evolved, space, beyond rank. The world cracked open around me. Void step became a leap through the void itself. I was behind Varga before he finished his sentence, a spatial blade shearing through the shield he'd thought impenetrable. And then I reached out and folded space around Ray, tore her free of the collapsing field, and pulled her to me in a single motion, the cage that had held her simply ceasing to apply. She gasped, free, shaken, alive. Varga whirled, and for the first time the cold composure cracked into something raw. How, he demanded. Because this is past your ceiling, I said, and I don't have one anymore. Now I could fight him. I drove him back across the broken ground, void steps he couldn't track, spatial blades he had to give ground to block, confinement nipping at the edges of him, so he had to break free instead of pressing. The man who'd put me on my knees minutes ago was suddenly the one recalculating, and I watched the certainty drain out of his face and something like alarm take its place. But he was still Varga, still swollen with the power he was channeling out of the break, and every exchange cost me. He caught a blade in an iron grip and slammed me into the rubble. I came up spitting blood, the ache in my chest screaming, the evolved ability burning through me faster than even the old one had. We were trading at a terrible rate, and I couldn't keep it up forever. So I stopped trying to outtrade him, and I started watching. Get clear, I told Ray between exchanges, and she didn't argue, She got the surviving civilians moving and pulled back, trusting me to finish it, which was its own kind of gift. And then fighting him at the new tier with senses that reached further than they ever had, I felt it, the rhythm under Varga's power, the pulse. His strength wasn't his. He was channeling it, all of it straight out of the broken gate behind him, the wound in the sky, drawing the apocalypse itself through his body like a man holding a live wire. It made him monstrous. It also meant he was anchored. Cut the wire, and there was just a man. The realization went through me like cold light. Brute force would never beat him. He had an ocean to draw on. But the ocean had a single point where it poured into him, the core of the broken gate, and reaching an impossible point through folded space was the one thing in all the world I could do better than anyone alive. I saw exactly how to win, and I saw exactly what it would cost. Going for the core meant going through Varga's full fury to get there, spending the evolved power at a rate my torn body might not survive. Varga gathered himself for another devastating strike, the ground trembling under the weight of what he was pulling through the break. Ray was clear, Lena was holding, Marcus was bleeding somewhere behind me, still standing because I'd asked him to. I set my feet, the new power roaring through me and burning me hollow, and I fixed on the glowing core of the wound in the sky. Whatever it takes, I'd told myself. This was the part where I found out what that meant. Chapter 18, Reckoning. Varga stopped holding back the moment he understood I might actually win, and for a heartbeat, the broken sky belonged entirely to him. You think you can stop me? His laughter rolled out twisted and vast. I am the architect of this world, you are a blip. He poured everything through himself at once, the full torrent of the break, raw apocalypse channeled into a single man, and it was overwhelming. The ground shattered. Monsters boiled out of the rupture without end. His blows landed like freight trains. I pulled a blade from storage and met what I could and bled for the rest, driven back across the broken ground, every bone in me ringing. For a long, terrible stretch, it looked exactly like the first life all over again. Varga astride a dying city, and me not enough to stop him. But I wasn't trying to overpower him. I'd stopped trying to do that a chapter ago. I was watching the pulse, the live wire running from the broken gate's core into his chest, the anchor that made him a god, and if I could reach it, the thing that made him just a man. No one else could reach it, not the strongest S-rank alive. The core sat inside the rupture itself, behind a wall of power, in a place ordinary movement couldn't go. But I didn't move ordinarily anymore. I activated concealment and folded myself out of the fight entirely, out of sight, out of the path of his next devastating strike, and I void-stepped through the fabric of the world toward the heart of the break, faster than thought, into the place his anchor lived. Varga felt me go and understood too late what I was doing. You, he roared, wild with desperation now, lunging to stop me. I slipped his grasp with a step through space, and another, always a half-beat out of his reach, closing on the core. And then I had it, his anchor, the searing point where the apocalypse poured into him, and I wrapped confinement around it and around him both, folding space shut on the wire and the man at once, and I shattered it. Varga broke the sky by reaching for a power that was never his to hold. I closed it by reaching a place no one but me could go, and I folded it shut with him on the wrong side of it. The rupture screamed and began to seal. Severed from the break, his borrowed apocalypse unraveling all at once, Varga's power guttered out of him like a snuffed flame. His eyes went wide with disbelief, the architect undone by the one ability in all the world built to reach the unreachable, and then the collapsing wound took him, and his scream folded into silence as the sky knit itself closed above the city. Gate sealed. It wasn't a triumph I gloated over. It was a reckoning, and it carried the whole weight of 2 lives behind it, the betrayal, the dark, the first death under this exact sky, the people I'd come back to save. The man who'd ended my first world was gone, undone not by more power than his, but by the one thing he'd never had and never understood, a reason worth reaching past every limit for. I dropped to my knees in the sudden stillness, spent past anything I'd ever felt, the evolved space ability having burned through me, the ache in my chest, now a deep, permanent thing, years of my life and more spent in that single fold. But I was breathing, and the sky was whole. They found me there, in the quiet after. Marcus first, clutching a wounded arm, alive because he was too stubborn to be otherwise. "You did it," he said hoarsely, nodding at the sealed sky. Lena next, pale and shaking with relief, gripping his good shoulder. "Thank you, Ronan," she whispered, and there was no apology in it and no debt, just a woman who'd held a line all night and lived to see the dawn, looking at the man she'd chosen. And Ray, bloodied and upright, a hand coming to rest on my shoulder. "You did more than anyone could have hoped for," she said quietly. The monstrous tide was receding like shadows at dawn. The day that had killed me and thousands more in another life, the day I'd carried in my head for a second lifetime, dreading it, had become, by my own hand, the day the city survived. I stayed on my knees a moment longer, the weight of it lifting off my shoulders for the first time since I'd woken up gasping in a dead man's bed. The catastrophe was over. The people I loved were alive, and the future I'd come back to rewrite was, finally, rewritten. The city held its breath, and then, slowly, began to live again. Chapter 19, What He Kept. In my first life, the day after the sky broke, I was a name on a list of the dead. In my second, I was the man the city woke up owing its life to. The sky was clear for the first time in what felt like forever, though the air still hummed with the aftermath of the break. The city was already rebuilding, and it knew exactly who to thank. People pointed as I passed, whispering that the man who'd closed the sky looked so ordinary, tall and broad but nothing monstrous, until you caught his eyes. It was the precise inverse of the first life, where I died unmourned in the dark while the people I trusted ran. I stopped by a small memorial going up for the lost, and the costs sat heavy on me, the ones I hadn't reached in time, Marcus's wound that would take months to heal, the years of my own life the evolved space had burned away. We'd saved thousands. It hadn't been free, nothing worth keeping ever was. "Ronan," Lena jogged up, warm and bright. "City Hall wants to honor you, the whole city's coming." "I'll be there," I said. There was no more hiding, not the space ability, not any of it. The trump card had become simply the truth. I was the strongest hunter in the city, and everyone knew it, and for once I didn't need to pretend otherwise. The boy they'd thrown away had become the man they couldn't stop looking at. Sierra came to me one last time, in the quiet of a park at dusk. Her hair was shorter, dark circles under her eyes, the S-rank shine long gone, just a survivor now among many, while the man she'd discarded had become the one the city built its hope around. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for saving me during the break." "You're welcome," I said, "but that's not why you came." She searched my face for the man she thought she'd known. I gave her the truth instead. "I didn't save you because I still loved you," I told Sierra. "I saved you because I decided, a long time ago, that I wasn't going to leave people in the dark, not even you. That's the whole difference between us. It always was." It landed, and this time there was no charm to hide behind and nothing left to bargain with. Just understanding, clean and total and far too late. "You're right," she said quietly. "There's no reason for you to forgive me. I just needed to know." "Goodbye, Sierra," I said and turned and walked toward the city lights. She didn't call after me. The last thread that had ever bound me to her was cut, and on the other side of it there was nothing but room. I didn't look back, and I felt no loss at all. What I felt was waiting for me back home. Lena walked beside me through the rebuilding streets, light and steady, her hand finding mine. "You've come so far," she said. "So have you." And I meant it. She'd held a line through the end of the world and never once needed saving, the partner I'd been too blind to choose the first time around. We found Ray at a cafe on the way back, and she dropped into the seat across from us without ceremony, bloodied knuckles healing, that sharp confidence undimmed. Whatever had started between us in a deep gate had been forged the rest of the way in a burning city, and it didn't need announcing. It was just there, in the way she looked at me like an equal who decided to stay. And Marcus was waiting at the apartment when we got there, on his crutches, grumbling about being honored for getting his arm half torn off, and we ate together and dragged out old jokes, and the four of us filled a room with the kind of warmth I had spent a whole first life convinced wasn't meant for someone like me. That was the thing the competitor's world never gave its heroes, and the thing I'd come back for without even knowing it. Not the power was just a tool. This, a woman whose faith in me predated my strength, a woman who'd chosen me as a peer in the middle of an apocalypse, a friend who'd bled beside me and lived, a life with people in it who would not leave when it stopped being convenient. I died the first time, alone and empty-handed, loving a woman who only spent affection on the useful. This time, when the dust settled, my hands were full and my back was covered, and not one of the people around me was there because I was strong. They were there because I'd chosen them, and they'd chosen me back. That night, Lena's head on my shoulder, Ray half asleep in the chair, Marcus snoring on the couch, I lay awake a while and felt, for the first time in either life, no regret at all. Only gratitude for what I'd kept. The revenge was paid, the city was saved, and the empty-handed man who died in the dark had, somehow, ended up with everything that ever actually mattered. Chapter 20, Voidborn. I built, in my second life, the exact thing the first one was supposed to give me and never did. A life with people in it who would not leave when it stopped being convenient. I woke to morning light through the bedroom window, a stark contrast to the dark I'd died in the first time around. The space ability hummed low and familiar behind my eyes, no longer a secret, just a part of me. Down in the streets, the city was rebuilding, people reclaiming blocks the monsters had taken, most of them never knowing how close it had all come to ending, or that a man none of them would once have looked twice at had been the reason it didn't. I was a top-ranked hunter now, openly, the strongest in the city, leading a crew people lined up to join. Marcus was my right hand, healing slow but unbreakable, gruff and loyal beyond measure. Ray fought at my side as an equal who'd chosen to stay. And Lena, her fire and her steadiness woven all through my days now, was my partner in every sense that mattered. The boy they'd thrown away had a family he'd chosen, and a city that owed him its life, and a power he'd earned instead of borrowed. It was everything the first life was supposed to hand me and never did. I hadn't been given it. I'd gone back into the dark and built it with my own hands. There would be more gates. There always would be deeper ones, threats past the city, a system still playing some longer game I could feel out at the edges of things. The world was vast and dangerous and nowhere near finished. But that was the distinction I'd finally learned to make. The world wasn't finished, it never is. But my story, the one that started with a man they threw away, was. There's a difference between a road that keeps going and a story that isn't done, and for the first time in 2 lives, I knew exactly which one I was walking. I wasn't standing at a cliff's edge with everything unresolved behind me, the way I had the first time. Every debt was paid. Sierra and Tristan answered. Varga finished, the catastrophe that had defined and ended me averted on the very day it once killed me. The people I loved alive and chosen and choosing me back. There was nothing unsettled at my back at all, only a road ahead, and the free, unhurried choice of how to walk it. We ended the day in a small park that had been cleared for it, a patch of grass under an old oak, the sunset going gold over the scaffolding and the generators, the sounds of a city putting itself back together. Lena leaned against me. Ray sat near, easy. Marcus lowered himself down with a grunt and a complaint about his arm. "I can't believe we made it," Lena said softly. "We did what needed doing," I said. "You're something else, you know that," Ray said, with the half-smile she gave me when she meant it. "He's got more than strength going for him now," Marcus said, and that was as sentimental as Marcus got, and it was enough. I leaned back against the old bark and felt the warmth of them around me, this family I'd chosen rather than been given, and the space ability sat quiet in me, the void I'd been reborn carrying that I'd once thought was only a weapon. They threw me away once, when I was weak and alone in the dark. I had come back carrying a whole world in my hands, and in the end, the thing I used it to hold on to wasn't power at all. I was thrown away once. This time I came back and I took everything they tried to take from me, and then I did the one thing my first life never let me do, I kept it. The people who stayed, the city that lived, the life I was never supposed to have. The void gave me room enough to carry all of it, and for the first time in either life, my hands were full and nothing in them was borrowed. That was the whole of it. That was enough.